Michael Saylor will go down as probably being the most successful investor if everything works out. He's kind of quickly becoming the face of Bitcoin. Though Bitcoin does not have a CEO or a organization that runs it, it's completely decentralized. He's starting to become somewhat of the poster boy of Bitcoin. And you might ask yourself why. Let's start by checking out this interview with him and Sean Hannity.
Do you know what a blockchain is? What is blockchain technology? What are the differences between Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a bunch of other cryptocurrencies? What is a Bitcoin wallet? What is an exchange? Why don't you break this down simply for people like me that don't fully understand?
This is one of the best Bitcoin explanations of all time.
Here to break it all down, MicroStrategy CEO Michael Saylor. Why don't you break this down simply for people like me that don't fully understand it?
Okay. Well, let's start with the basic principle. People came to the United States for two things: property and freedom. And Bitcoin represents property and freedom to 8 billion people. Satoshi created a computer program that would run in a distributed fashion on computers all around the earth. And that program creates 21 million virtual coins in cyberspace. The way it works is he created perfect digital gold on an open monetary network. And so that means if you wanted to save $1,000 and you wanted to have it beyond the reach of a company, a CEO, a government, a bank, and you wanted to have personal custody of it, you could have that with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a technical solution to give 8 billion people property rights. If I can own $100 in my hand as easily as I can own $1 billion. And we've never had that in the history of the human race. So what does it mean to El Salvador? Well, at El Salvador, you have a bunch of people that don't have a bank, and they don't have assets, and they don't have access to Wall Street.
Also, if you're not aware, El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender back in 2021. So it's a big deal. I mean, it's you can use it for, it's accepted currency everywhere in the country, and you can pay taxes and legal fees and things like that with it. Just FYI, if you didn't know, that's why he's bringing that up.
So when their relatives remit money back to El Salvador, they lose 10% of their money through money transfer agents. Once they get the money, they lose 10 to 20% of its value a year because they're storing it in a currency, not in an asset. The exciting thing about Bitcoin is Bitcoin lets you save your money in an asset that goes up in value, and it lets you move that asset at the speed of light all around the planet. And what the president of El Salvador realized is, using the Bitcoin network, they could cut $1 billion of cost in remittances every year to their people. They could put themselves on the world's first digital monetary network. And instead of their people losing 10 to 20% of their value a year and 10% when they move it, they're going to actually make money, and they're going to be able to move that value around for free.
Michael, let me ask you this. I mean, because you talk a lot about the history of sound money and other cryptocurrencies, but you really think it's Bitcoin. You think Bitcoin is the breakout for a reason. Why over, say, Ethereum or any other one?
Bitcoin is the dominant crypto asset network. It's the oldest, it's the strongest, it's the most secure, and it was engineered to do one thing well, which is to keep track of 21 million virtual coins in cyberspace. The other cryptos are applications, and application networks are focused upon functionality or performance. Bitcoin is optimized for durability, integrity, security. If I want to store $1 billion for 1,000 years, I don't want a lot of bells and whistles on it. I just want to know it's secure and nobody's going to change it. So why Bitcoin? Because Satoshi started with a model of gold, and then he got rid of all the defects of gold. If you took gold and you said you can't mine anymore, you can't use it for jewelry, and nobody can rehypothecate it or short it, and you could take personal custody of it in your head, and no one can steal it from you, you would have a better gold. And so Bitcoin is designed to be that long-term store of value. And of course, humans have been looking for a way to store their life force in a store of value for thousands and thousands of years. It's kind of part of the human dream.
What do you say to critics that worry that it will lose all of its value? Or what do you say, clearly governments, some seem to be dead set against this. What do you say to them?
Well, first of all, it's the most successful technology in our lifetimes. It's grown faster and more powerfully than Google or Facebook or Apple or Amazon. And it's a network and an asset that's held by about 150 million people, and we're adding 2 million people a week. So other than the dollar and the euro, it's the most widely held monetary asset in the world. And there's every indication that nation states are embracing it. Jerome Powell says it's a digital asset. Christine Lagarde says it's a digital asset. The head of the SEC taught a class on it. I think that people understand it's not a threat to the dollar, by the way. What's going to happen is the U.S. dollar is going to be the world reserve currency, and it's going to run on billions and billions of mobile devices. And the digital asset that underlies that currency is going to be Bitcoin.
Wow. I will tell you, my friends got me addicted. I'm a student. I'm learning. I'm still on the first chapter of sort of like cryptocurrency for dummies, but I can't read enough of it. I love reading.
One of the big things at the very end there, I think that is extremely important is, and I would agree with Mike on that, is Bitcoin's not a threat to the dollar being the world's reserve currency. The United States, they're not going to let that happen to where somehow we're decoupled from the dollar as being the reserve currency of the world, because that's really how we keep our hegemony. We could use our military and, project power that way, which we do, or exert power over somebody in that way with our military. But honestly, as of right now, I don't see us needing or wanting to do that. Even if there were people that really that had like maybe malevolent intent, it would be ignorant to start using our military to go around and exert power and force on people, because it's going to lead to so much death and so much war and so much problems that it's not the most effective way to control people. The most effective way, in my opinion, to control people in today's day and age, 2024, is by the monetary system. And that's why we are the world's hegemony without so much, military might having to be exerted. There hasn't been any more world wars the way we had World War II, because primarily, in my opinion, our monetary hegemony over everybody, which is our power. We have the most power. We run everything. We have the hegemony. We have we're the privileged ones. We're the ones that have the control over the existing system. So anyways, I agree with them. A lot of people get really confused on, is Bitcoin going to become the world's reserve currency? Are we all going to use that? And they're a lot of times considered Bitcoin maximalists. It's an ignorant way to go. You really want to go up against the United States, and then eventually the United States military, if Bitcoin got that big, you want them to be at odds with each other? No, we want them to work with one another. And that's the way, also in my opinion, it's going to be. So next phase here, we're going to get into a few interviews from the Bitcoin Atlantis conference. And then especially, just like our title, we're going to have Mike talk a little bit about the Bitcoin gold rush. So check this out. It's phenomenal.
But I do think if we're talking about the future of Bitcoin, I think that we're in the Bitcoin gold rush era. And it started in January of 2024. And it will run till about November of 2034. It's a 10-year. And the reason how many people know what happened in November of 2034? It's an important date, If you pull Clark Moody's dashboard, you'll see that. In November of 2034, 99% of all the Bitcoin will have been mined. And the last 1% comes out over the next 100 years. So for all practical purposes, stock to flow becomes irrelevant. The stock to flow ratio of Bitcoin is infinity in 2034. It's within the tolerance of just random hourly trading of the asset. So it becomes noise. And so you have about 42 quarters, somewhere between 40 and 42 quarters. And if you look at that 40 quarter period, at the beginning of the gold rush, no bank could custody Bitcoin, no institutional investor could buy Bitcoin, no Wall Street trading firm, no investment company could handle Bitcoin, and it was unclear whether that ever would happen. That was a binary. And when those spot ETFs were approved, that created a fire or an avalanche. The genie's out of the bottle. It doesn't matter who's elected president next. It doesn't matter who's the next head of the SEC. It doesn't matter. No politician's opinion, no banker opinion, no regulator opinion matters after that date. That was the most consequential thing that kicked off the gold rush. Now, as of the first quarter of this year, which is we're in now, right? February 29th, March 1st. What's the date?
March
I get
1st.
my dates messed up in leap years because everything's off by a day. But you know, every single institutional investor would have looked at this and said, Bitcoin interesting, but I can't buy it. You know? Everybody. And so you have 99% of the money in the world that has been unable to buy and so unwilling to consider things. Institutional investors are like this. Like they could watch your company and like have a million opinions but don't really care. And you could go to them on a Tuesday morning and say, do you want to buy $50 million worth of this security? And they'll then look at it and they'll give you an answer by 4 p.m. So when they can buy via their bank, their institutional wirehouse, their prime broker, they will make a $50 million decision in 1 hour. And they will watch you and cheer for you or laugh at you for 20 years when they can't buy. So we flipped a switch in January. What you've got is 40 quarters of people getting educated, and here's what happens next. All those ETFs, they're only distributed through 20% of the distribution channel right now. They're maybe even 10%. So that distribution is going to go from 10% to 20 to 40 to 60 to 80, and there'll be a point at which all the investors can buy. And you know, I had to fill out. You know, you have to fill out 3 waivers from 3 different accounts, you know, as of a few weeks ago. So you're going to see resistance drop. You're going to see all the major banks add support. Then the next question is, well, is it creditworthy? Can I borrow against the asset? No major bank in the world will give you a loan against those ETFs yet. They've all got clocks that are running after 30 days, after 90 days, after 6 months, after a year. So first they let you buy it, then they loan you money against it. None of those instruments can you trade options on. You can't buy or sell puts and calls on a spot ETF. That'll be a year. So what you're going to see is it'll take years for the distribution to open up, for the credit capillaries to work, for the volatility trading to kick in, for the hedging to kick in. Then you'll actually see all the big banks that don't like Bitcoin getting pressured. Like now we have to custody it because our biggest customer wants us to. So right now you can't custody, but there's a big battle afoot on Capitol Hill. That battle will take place. Bitcoin will win that battle. Then you'll see banks custody. Then you'll see 1. Then you'll see 10. Then you'll see 100. Then you'll see 1,000. And likewise, there's famous analysts. You can name the analysts that cover Bitcoin today. Len Alden, Chris Kuiper, right? Yassine, right? There'll be a day when there'll be 200. You won't be able to name them all, right? There'll be a day when Bitcoin ETFs have already blasted past gold, and then Bitcoin ETFs trade more than the S&P index ETFs. And there'll be a day, I believe, when Bitcoin ETFs will have more capital than SPY or the S&P index. And on that day, the people at Vanguard will say, oops, I guess all the money just shifted out of equity. But that day won't come tomorrow. It'll take many, many quarters. And by the time we get to 2034, I think you can say the high growth institutional adoption phase of Bitcoin has now moved to just the growth phase.
Okay, so you can see there, it's just summed up so well, so quickly by him, because he's been in the industry. He's owned a company that has been listed on the stock or NASDAQ for, I want to say it's like 15 years. And it's a very complex company where they're doing a lot of, he's kind of leveraging a lot of his aspects of his business to be able to do different things in the technological or tech realm. Then when he figured out Bitcoin, he decided, oh shit, I'm going to start leveraging all my stock and putting more Bitcoin specifically on my balance sheet because he believed in the technology. And so he's already familiar with how essentially Wall Street works and how, the big dogs when it comes to institutional finance, banking, lending, and securities work. So he's kind of has a different lens, things that even I would find hard to articulate. I have a broad overview, but I don't know what the hell I'm talking about yet, And so when I listen to him, I'm like, man, that was so clear and concise. The ETFs, though, those were just like a paradigm shift. That's a time where, like he's mentioning, the biggest thing, and you're going to see this the more that you dig into this, is the ETFs themselves. Yes, it's a ton of capital inflows coming in and a ton of people that are buying and custodying Bitcoin, which will allow it to rise in price, right? But the other thing about it is it, so to speak, gives us regulatory clarity because now we're listed. Now we have the SEC that, has lost battle after battle in court, who essentially has to admit this is not a security. Okay, it's somewhat of a commodity, but it's different altogether. It doesn't really work with the Howey test. You can't really use the old testing to see if it's a security or is it a commodity. It's a completely different type of asset class. So what I like about what he's talking about, though, and I love this whole idea of the Bitcoin gold rush going on from now until 2034. Now, what he's mentioning, if you're not familiar, in 2034 is when every 4 years Bitcoin protocol halves the amount of new Bitcoin it allows in the system. We've talked about this before, how the mining industry works and how the Bitcoin mining works. I don't want to discuss it in this exact moment. If you need to know, go back to my previous video. But every 4 years, there's 50% less of new Bitcoin coming into the system. Now, what he's mentioning is in 2034, 99% of all Bitcoin had been released into the system. So there's no more new Bitcoin. And if you're familiar with how stocks work, oftentimes they issue new shares. This is like back to the ETF. So if there's just so much capital, they can continue to issue new shares, which will continue to grow the liquidity pool, but the amount of shares that are out there, people can continue to buy, and it keeps the market cap somewhat down and the price per share down, and it allows it to spread out a little bit more, and it keeps it within a place where they can manipulate it, honestly. But with Bitcoin, you can't do it anymore. So what's going to happen with all that money that comes in is there's no more. It's a scarce asset. That's when you're going to see the price just go rocket ship, And so this aspect of what Bitcoin is, the fact that it's a scarce asset and that in 2034, 99% will be mined, and it's just really going to be something that has a cap on it, That's why people aren't quite understanding why it's going to be such a shock to the system at this time. That's why it cannot be stopped right now. And it's why so much new money is coming into that space from our old analog space. So if you can kind of view it in this lens that you had analog, real world, we have digital coming, and there's plenty of ways to get involved into the digital space. I myself am an Ethereum guy, though I do mine Bitcoin. So I'm on both. I'm not a maximalist on any side, but I believe in Ethereum more. We're going to do a separate video on that. Tune in. But at the same time, Ethereum couldn't exist without Bitcoin, which is why I'm not against it. People like to pit them against one another. The idea is Bitcoin really is fundamentally important because it's built for the protocol not to change. It's built to be a scarce asset, and it is the most decentralized, even more decentralized than Ethereum, hands down. I'm fine admitting that. And so the point on this whole gig and listening to him explain this in this way is expect the next decade I tell everybody, anything you can possibly do, any amount of money that you can put into this space, if you don't know how to do it, give me a buzz. Hit me up. Let me know. I will show you how to get into the space. Pawn your shit, sell your house, sell your car, live out of your vehicle, whatever you got to do. Get as much money as you humanly possibly can into this space. And you will see within the next decade, you will not be left behind. If you don't do that, maybe you have some other investments that may work out moderately okay, but they will never see the return on investment that what you're going to get through Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the other strong projects that are in the cryptocurrency and digital space. So we got a few more on here that I want to show you with Natalie Brunell, just some kind of rapid fire clips, and we'll hit with the outro on the very end here. Check these ones out with Nat Brunell.
Okay, to wrap up, I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round. Why should Jamie Dimon love Bitcoin?
Because Bitcoin is the future and JP Morgan is the greatest bank in the United States. And if it wants to remain the greatest bank in the United States or in the world, then it needs to support, the future of assets.
Why should Elizabeth Warren love Bitcoin?
Because it empowers all of the disenfranchised in the world that she speaks for.
Why should a single mother on food stamps love Bitcoin?
Because it gives her hope to save for the future, and it's the best possible savings technology for her and her family.
Why should a boomer about to retire love Bitcoin?
Because everything else they could invest in or depend upon is riskier.
And lastly, why should a teenager in a third world country love Bitcoin?
Because it gives them a conduit to the first world and the global economy and lets them participate in that economy.
Who has made the biggest impact on your life?
Satoshi.
Really? Okay, I love that. If you could transport yourself to any time in history, what would it be and why?
Now,
you want to be forward.
We're going to look at history as before Satoshi and after Satoshi. And the ability to bring Bitcoin to the 99% of the world that has not yet embraced it in the year 2024, like this is the Bitcoin gold rush. The next 10 years is the most exciting opportunity to improve the world that has ever existed.
What's better, having money or having power?
Money is power.
How often do you check Bitcoin's price?
Every few hours.
All right, so this is our final little outro clip for this whole commentary on Michael Saylor, Nat Brunell. We got a little Hannity in there, and the Bitcoin Atlantis conference. All Michael Saylor at that conference. But I put this together because, these are some of the names you want to follow. Michael Saylor, just to me, I feel like he has the simplest way to really capture your attention and then allow you to kind of dig deeper into the space, But some other names that are really huge. Natalie Brunell's really nice. A lot of people like Saifedean, and I forget his last name. He's got a good book out there. These are great guys to follow. You also have Lynn Alden on there. I'm not super fan of, but she's okay. I think she's fine. And then you have Peter McCormick, great resource to be able to listen to just to get an understanding to start of Bitcoin. And then you can delve deeper into the space. So I'll leave you with this kind of hook at the very end. You have Bitcoin, which is the first cryptocurrency that actually worked, that solved the double spend problem. In 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto, he developed it and put it out into the internet, the space, the world. And then he went anonymous, right? Which was fundamental. And it's just such a fucking G move, man. That's why people get all culty and shit about it. They get all religious about it and everything. And it's nothing like that. But I'm sorry, that was a badass move to be able to do that, And so there's no CEO, there's no founder, there's nobody that you could call and say, hey, why is this happening? It is truthfully decentralized. So it was fundamental, right? So it's out there, it's kicking ass, and it's borderline unstoppable. I think If you were to ask me briefly, it could be stopped by the United States, because what we can actually do is get the majority of Bitcoin miners here in the US, buy all the Bitcoin through these ETFs and any other tool we have. Once we have enough control over the majority of Bitcoin out there, because it's so decentralized, guys, that would be almost like trying to go around the world and find anybody with a computer and taking the code out of their computer. It'd be difficult. So we don't care about the little guys out there. And if we're in there, the little guys that have some of this, you're going to benefit from this. But if the US goes through and they actually start saying, okay, we own it all, now we can control it through our medium of exchange, which would be the US stock market, the US economy, the Federal Reserve, World Bank, International Monetary Fund. We continue the hegemony. We continue the control over this. This will happen, by the way. It's going to happen. Then, whether you hear about it or we hear about it or not, when we have maybe another nation state or another larger a sovereign that has a lot of Bitcoin in in their country, and they're holding it and custodying it, and let's say they're trying to project power with that, right? They're saying, well, we don't want to be a part of your system. We don't care about the dollar anymore, the world's reserve currency, because that has to stay the world's reserve currency. Otherwise, we're going to war, baby. That's why everybody's like, oh yeah, Bitcoin's going to take over. That's a bad idea. If you start decoupling the dollar from the world being the world's reserve currency, we will go to war. We will start bringing out the military, hands down. I mean, just think about it. If you yourself in your house had all the money in the neighborhood, and all of a sudden somebody was like, hey, that ain't worth anything, and you had some guns and you knew how to fight, when they start to take your money, you're going to be like, fuck you. You better be ready to fucking fight me over that shit, because you ain't going to take my stuff. I will fight you for it, or I will kill you for it. Come on. You know you would if you had all that much money. You know you would. If you were the one running the show and somebody tried to say your money's not worth anything anymore, our money's worth it now, and we're going to try to take over, and you were bigger than them and stronger than them, come on. This is common sense. And yes, the United States will do it. And we'll say we had to do it. Otherwise, the whole world would have went into chaos. To be honest with you, it could be the case, So when that day happens, though, you're going to start hearing about little, Delta Force missions and shit going in, because all we're going to do at that point, when we have everything here, we're just going to take out their data centers. It's going to be like, oh, you have some Bitcoin miners? Oh, that you mean you used to? It's so funny. We just had a drone strike in that neighborhood, but it was because there was terrorism. It wasn't because we were taking out your Bitcoin miners. That's all that's going to happen. We'll control it, and then we will devastate anybody that has any type of nodes running, because you can find out where the node is running. It's all on a server, or not a server, but it's a protocol that everybody could see. Everybody could see the ledger. Everybody could see where the nodes are going, where the Bitcoin's coming from, and where it's being mined from. This is not like a shadow fucking dark web bullshit. It's difficult to figure out. Yeah, I can't sit here and figure it out, but I know that it's very transparent. You're not going to be able to hide your Bitcoin mining node. You can't hide it. So if we, as the United States, say, hey, you know what? From here on out, you guys can't have it. Only we get to have it. Kind of like we've done in the past with, gold and things like that. When people used to own gold and the U.S. said, now you're going to give us your gold. You must take the dollar. Ooh, it's almost like that's possibly happening before in the past. So it's going to happen again. The idea, though, I'm not even saying that's a terrible thing. Do you want anybody else to maintain control? Do you want China to do that? No. I think we ought to go ahead and do it, right? In the meantime, we got a decade, right? And in that meantime, while you can, you need to buy some. You gotta get as much as you humanly possibly can right now. Fuck all those other investments. They might be fun. Have a great time. Whatever you're doing, you don't have to get rid of all of it, but put a good percentage, as much as you humanly possibly can, right here, right there, what you learned and heard right now. That's where you want to be. And Ethereum is going to grow way bigger than Bitcoin. There might be a time where they kind of go neck and neck for how much, it's not going to matter, because eventually by the time they're competing for who has more market cap, like more money, people aren't going to really give a shit about dollars anymore, because you'll be able to use Ethereum and Bitcoin to actually make purchases where you give a shit about making purchases by that time, which is going to be in the digital space. You won't need dollars anymore there. You'll actually be able to purchase with one of those mediums of exchanges, Bitcoin or Ethereum or many other protocols that you could use the way that you use certain coins or resources that you build up in your video games or anything else you may trade with on something online, or when you build up tokens or something like that when you're playing. I keep thinking video games, but I know there's other things, cash apps and all the other different apps that people use, and you get in little communities, Pokemon, shit like that. It always goes back to games, I suppose. But, they're gamifying things like Credit Karma and all that now too, where if you do this, you get extra tokens, you get extra credit, you can get, you can do Experian Boost, and now you get better credit scores over that. So they're always gamifying it and making a way that you could gain assets, resources, or money in a sense, or better credit so you can use money out here in the analog world through the digital space. Pretty soon it's just going to all be digital. So with Ethereum though, and I'm going to talk about that on the next video. So tune in on the next one so that you can find out why, in my opinion, Ethereum is always going to be the dominant cryptocurrency. Bitcoin will always be the dominant commodity, energy, digital asset. But Ethereum's not trying to be that. In fact, Ethereum is trying to be somewhat of the internet of money, like the way you use the internet, but imagine if it was blended with money. So you could always use your money the way you use different applications online. It doesn't always have to be $1, If you think about it right now, you want to buy something on Amazon, well, you had to connect it to your bank account or a credit card. So now you're dealing with MasterCard, and I have my credit card I like to connect with my Amazon, but then I have, Wells Fargo for my bank over here, and then I also have Fidelity for my investments. But what if I wanted to take some money out of my Fidelity account and send it to somebody through Venmo who is living in Norway? Too much, right? There's too many okay, I can transfer it here, and then I can do this, and there's a fee for that, and then I can get it in my bank account, and then from there I can pay a bill. I could pay my credit card up, and then I can send it on the credit card. And you've paid 15 fees just to get some money from your investment account to send to somebody who needed some money out in Norway, right? So if you didn't have to have all those barriers and you had one centralized protocol that managed all your funds, your investments, your mortgage, your car loan, your insurance, your paycheck comes in all through Ethereum. That's what it will be. So, and that's what they're building it to be. Bitcoin would never be that. It doesn't need to be that. If it tried to be that, it would break the way that you just heard. It needs to be simple, sound, digital commodity energy asset. So tune in again, and I'm going to do as best a breakdown as I can on Ethereum for you, because I really think that right now that is the asset and token and project cryptocurrency that you're going to hear the most of between today, which is March 6th, 2024. By the time we hit March 6th, 2025, everybody's going to be talking about Ethereum. As much as they're talking about Bitcoin, they're going to be talking about Ethereum. And a bunch of other meme coins and shit too, and I'm all about those as well. But at the same time, you need to understand them and know how to use it and where to place your interest in outside of Bitcoin. For right now, stay with Bitcoin. It's safe, simple to understand. It's your gateway, It's like weed. Just start with that. Ain't gonna hurt you. You can't die. Can't get addicted. But down the road, we're gonna get you into some more fun shit. Okay, just depending on what you like to do. So either way around, tune in on the next one, and I look forward to seeing you then. Late.